What's the best way to figure out how valuable a player really is? This has been a debate in baseball for basically as long as the game's been played. There's the old eye test, just watch a player play and you'll be able to see how talented he is. Then there's your more traditional stats, so reading the box score, stuff like home runs and slash lines, or a pitcher's ERA and strikeouts. Then more recently, it's been advanced stats, with the granddaddy of them all being WAR. If you haven't heard of WAR before, it stands for wins above replacement, and its purpose is to take all of the numbers that we have in baseball and turn it into one simple number that tells you how valuable a player's really been. Now, the part that gets confusing sometimes is that WAR doesn't compare a player against your average major leaguer. It's comparing them against a replacement level player. That 27th guy on the roster that's the first one to get called up from AAA when somebody on the major league team gets hurt or traded or cut. So the scale for WAR then is that 0 is your replacement level player. 2 WAR is your everyday starter in the major leagues. 5 WAR is an all-star level player, and 8 or more WAR is your MVP, Cy Young caliber type of player. So usually then, we end up seeing our MVP and Cy Young candidates at the end of the year towards the top of the WAR leaderboards. And this year is no different, with names like Shohei Ohtani, Ronald Acuna Jr., and Ha-Seong Kim? Kim is currently tied for first place with Ronald Acuna Jr. at the top of the bWAR list for hitters with 5.0 bWAR, above guys like Ohtani, Corey Seager, Freddie Freeman, and Mookie Betts. But Kim isn't as good as these guys, right? So how is he ranked above them as a more valuable player? This season in 98 games, Kim is hitting 273, 365, 445 for an 810 OPS with 14 home runs, for a 127 OPS plus and 126 WRC plus. These are good numbers for sure, but there's gotta be some kind of a mistake here, right? Because these other guys are putting up definitely better offensive numbers. And he's at the top in terms of baseball reference WAR, but Fangraphs WAR has him ranked 12th at 3.5 fWAR. So what's going on here? How is he the best player in the league and not even in the top 10 at the same time? Well, let's really talk about WAR for a second. Both Baseball Reference and Fangraphs have their own versions of WAR, and while they're meant to do the same thing, which is give us one number to show how good a player's been, they go about this in 2 different ways. Both sites start with 1,000 WAR per 162 games to give out to all the players in Major League Baseball. Fangraphs gives 570 of that to position players and 430 to pitchers, while Baseball Reference gives 590 to position players and 410 to pitchers. So Fangraphs gives a little bit more value to pitchers than Baseball Reference does. Then the second and the biggest difference here is the main stat that each site uses to measure a player's offensive, defensive, pitching, and even base running value. So let's go through and talk about what these stats are and compare them against each other a bit. For measuring hitting, let's start with Baseball Reference, which uses OPS plus as their main stat. OPS, or on base plus slugging, is your on base percentage and your slugging percentage just added together. It was our first one-size-fits-all stat that was meant to measure how good a hitter's doing both at getting on base and how well they're hitting the ball. The plus part of this means that this is an adjusted stat, and for any stat with a plus or minus, they're adjusted for how well the rest of the league is doing on average and the home ballpark that a player plays in, because some parks are better for hitters and some are better for pitchers. Then this number is set on a scale where 100 is always league average, and every point that you go above or below this is 1% better or worse than average. For plus stats, being higher is better, and for minus stats, being lower is better. So OPS plus takes a hitter's OPS and compares it against how well the average hitter is doing that year, while keeping in mind the type of stadium that the player's home field is, and tells us how their OPS stacks up against the rest of the league in that situation. Now, Fangraphs uses WRC plus instead to measure their offense, which is pretty similar to OPS plus, but it uses WOBA instead of OPS. The difference here is that with OPS, for the on-base percentage part of this, every way that you can get on base is valued the same. You get the same amount of points for a walk, for reaching on an error, and for a home run. And then for the slugging percentage part, you get 1,000 points for every base that you get on a hit. So 1,000 points for a single, 2,000 for a double, and so on. And so this is where we start to run into some of the problems with OPS. That, for one, we know that a home run is way more valuable than a walk, but the on-base percentage part of OPS says that they're the same. Then with the slugging percentage part, it says that a double is worth exactly twice as much as a single. But is this really true? Is a single worth half as much as a double? Is a double worth half as much as a home run? Well, this is where wOBA comes in, weighted on base average. And the way that this stat is measured is that everything that a hitter can do, from a single to a strikeout to a home run, is given a value that's based on the average amount of runs that got scored every time that result happened. So you add up all the values for everything that a hitter's done over the course of a season, and you turn that number into something that looks like an on-base percentage, and that's your wOBA. So then for WRC+, it's exactly the same as OPS+, just like I said, you use wOBA instead of OPS. So you take a hitter's wOBA and compare it to how the rest of the league stacks up, again, keeping in mind the player's home ballpark, and you get their WRC+ on that same scale of 100 being average. But for position players, we can't just measure their offensive game because they have to do other things too, right? Like play defense. So this is where, despite having the highest OPS+ and WRC+ in baseball, Shohei Ohtani isn't first in either WAR in terms of position players because he doesn't play defense, so that kind of counts against him. But so what's the difference here defensively between these two WARs? Baseball Reference uses a stat called defensive runs saved, while Fangraphs uses ultimate zone rating, or UZR. And how these work and the difference between the two of them can get kind of confusing, so I'm gonna do my best. Both of these stats use data from Baseball Info Solutions to chart out how likely it is that a defensive play either gets made or doesn't, by dividing up the field into a bunch of different little zones and figuring out what the percentage chance is that a ball that gets put into play in a similar manner in each of these zones either gets recorded as an out or a hit. So on a fly ball to a certain spot in the outfield that has, say, an 80% chance of getting caught, if the fielder makes that play, they then get the difference. So in this case, it would be 20%. 20 plus 80 is 100. But if they don't make that play, then they lose that percentage, so 80% on this fly ball. Now they also factor in a similar kind of run probability here as wOBA, so a ball that would most likely go for extra bases if it drops is worth more than a ball that would very clearly just be a single. So if a fielder made a catch on a ball that, say, had a 5% chance of getting made, and if he doesn't get that, it's definitely gonna go for extra bases, he's gonna get a huge improvement on his defensive value. But then if he turns around and botches an easy pop-up, like a play that gets made 99% of the time, that's gonna absolutely kill his defensive value. Now in terms of the difference between the two, as far as I can find, UZR uses data from the last 3 years of balls in play, whereas defensive runs saved uses a rolling count over the last year, as well as using more batted ball timer data, such as how hard the ball was hit and how long a fly ball was in the air. So again, both of these stats try to accomplish the same goal here of just measuring how much a player helped his team by either making plays or not making plays. Did he save them runs or did he cost them? But they're each gonna rate things just a little bit different, and Fangraphs values defense a bit more than Baseball Reference does in their entire WAR calculation. Now finally, both of these have their own way of measuring a player's value on the base paths, with Baseball Reference using R-Baser and Fangraphs using BSR. Now both of these measure a player's value from stolen bases, caught stealing, taking extra bases, and getting thrown out on the base pass. But the main difference between these two is that Baseball Reference doesn't include grounding into double plays into R-Baser. So this is where we can start to understand the difference in how Kim's value is being measured differently here with bWAR versus fWAR. Not just with the different stats that we just talked about, but a player's value is also determined a lot by their position, because a player being able to do more at a more demanding defensive position like shortstop, center field, or catcher is more valuable than at like first base, because you don't have to do as much, so you're just kind of expected to hit more. Offensively, his 127 OPS plus is 33rd in the league, and his 126 WRC plus is 34th. so nearly the same to start out here. But then Baseball Reference has his bWAR ranked 14th in baseball, while Fangraphs has his total offense ranked 26th. So bWAR here is giving him more value offensively than fWAR. But now for the other part of his offensive game, there's a pretty clear difference here in his base running value, where Baseball Reference has him as the 8th best base runner so far due to a pretty high percentage of extra bases that he's taken in situations like going first to third and scoring from second on a single. But Fangraphs has his base running 29th. His stolen base percentage is below average with 19 bags stolen so far, but caught 6 times. Then defensively, Baseball Reference has him as the 2nd best defender so far, bouncing around between second base mainly with some shortstop and third as well, but Fangraphs only has him 12th. Now, again, Fangraphs values defense more in their version of WAR, so this could get a little closer than it looks right now. So which version of WAR is better? Really? That's for you to decide. bWAR uses more traditional stats in some cases, and they care more about on-field results over how the job necessarily gets done. Then fWAR uses more advanced stats to measure a player's underlying skill over the results that they may or may not be necessarily getting. In the end, they both have their ups and their downs, so find parts of each of them that you like, and honestly, use both. Kind of compare back and forth to see if the results that a player's getting match up with how well they've been playing. So which version of WAR do you prefer? And was there anything that I missed in explaining all of this? And I only really talked about WAR for position players. Let me know if you guys want to see a video like this about WAR for pitchers as well. Drop your thoughts down below, leave a comment, and if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications. Anything like that helps out the channel a bunch, and then you get to see more baseball content like this on Wednesdays and Sundays when we drop new videos. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and check out the video that's on your screen now, all about the Angels' current situation, whether they should trade Ohtani or not. Spoiler alert, this aged horribly. Have fun, have an awesome day. I'll see you later.